Red Hat and NETSCOUT have created a partnership to help improve telco operations and their relationships with enterprise customers. I'm Guy Daniels, Director of Content at Telecom TV, and joining me now to address the challenges and opportunities of enterprise 5G are Dr. Vikram Saksena, who is Chief Solutions Architect, CTO Office with NETSCOUT, and Azhar Sayeed, who is Chief Architect Telco with Red Hat. Hello both of you, thank you very much for taking part in our programme today. Azhar, first of all, can you tell us which industry verticals are focused on deploying enterprise 5G?
Several industry verticals have shown interest in deploying enterprise 5G, partly because today they're using a lot of Wi-Fi and/or LTE in that space, and now with the guarantees that 5G can provide ultra-reliable, low latency, and massive IoT type of capability, 5G is a very attractive proposition for them. Some of the industries that we've had initial interest and lots of conversations around is manufacturing, transportation, actually smart agriculture, believe it or not, in terms of deploying campus or small mushroom-style 5G networks. That actually monitor all of the environmental variables and actually provide the right type of information to the farmers to actually do better. Oil and gas is another area, and mining is another vertical where they want to use enterprise 5G to deploy in these open minefields and monitor equipment and monitor different variables so that they can actually provide better service and better maintenance on that particular equipment. Analytics is pretty important in that space. You can using 5G to provide connectivity. You can actually stream analytics from all these remote machines, the haulers and dredgers and all of that. And then based on that data, you can actually predict when an equipment is probably going to fail before that actually service it. Because once the equipment stops in those type of environments, it's a huge loss for the mining operator. Same thing in oil and gas, same thing in manufacturing is another area where there's a lot of interest in actually looking at the Purdue model, and particularly the last wireless access segment. There's a lot of 5G chipsets now being embedded into the plant floor, which can actually then deterministically communicate back in that particular Purdue model. So there's a lot of interest in enterprise 5G in all of these sectors. And we've been starting to work with them. Government is another area where there is some interest in deploying private 5G for various different use cases, whether it's military applications or whether it is, ad hoc deployments in case of emergency.
And Vikram, do you see interest from the same industry verticals as Azhar's mentioned?
Oh, yes, certainly. I think that those verticals, plus there are more of them. But the main point I wanted to make was that what is the time for enterprise 5G is right at this time. There is a confluence of factors that are coming together that are creating a perfect storm for enterprise 5G. And by that, I mean all the technology elements are in place with the spectrum that is available, with the CBRS and C-band spectrum that was released, big data analytics, cloud native technologies, and the smart sensors, which are powering all of these industry verticals. They're all there. The business drivers are there. The industries want to automate. They want to improve their productivity and efficiency in these models. And the enterprises themselves are ready because there are improvements that can happen through automation that flow directly either to the top line or the bottom line. So in that sense, I think the timing is right with the confluence of all these factors coming together.
And Vikram, you say now is a perfect time, but how is this market different from what we've seen with 4G?
Yes, good question. 4G was really a consumer-centric network. Because if you recall, 4G was launched just around the time where smartphones were becoming popular, and the iPhones and the Androids. And basically, it was designed to provide high-speed data services for consumers with these very powerful devices, which we call smartphones. But they were not really geared for enterprise services. Now, with the aspects of 5G, you have a standalone core, you have a mobile edge computing environment, you have network slicing there, and also in terms of download speeds and latency, the download speeds are 1 to 2 orders of magnitude better. The latency is 5 to 10 times better. The spectral efficiency is better. The density of devices that you can support on 5G is better. So there are a whole set of improvements that have been gone into 5G technology that are very well suited for bringing on enterprise customers and delivering what we call ultra low latency and ultra reliable services, which did not exist in the 4G space. So this is why I think 5G is very well suited for delivering enterprise services than 4G was.
Thanks, Vikram. Azhar, if the technology behind 5G is perfectly suited to enterprises now, what would you say are the challenges in deploying and actually managing enterprise 5G?
There are several challenges in terms of enterprise 5G. Now, enterprise 5G can be delivered in many different ways. It can be delivered as a private network to the enterprise. It can be delivered as a slice as part of the operator, or it can be delivered through a public cloud as well. Now, with those, there are different operational models and operational contexts in each one of them. Now, of course, an enterprise that's not really, that does not really understand all of this technology in terms of how to build it, may rely on a public cloud or on a telco to consume that particular enterprise 5G environment. Second thing is enterprise 5G, you need more shrink-wrapped capabilities, whether it's software, whether it's hardware, tuned to small scale but high performance. Whereas in a typical large 5G network, you'll need massive scale and high performance. So there are some small differences in terms of how you would do that. So enterprises need to educate themselves in terms of what is possible when they go and deploy this, or they need to partner up with telcos or partner up with public cloud providers to be able to build that particular infrastructure. I've been talking to actually several enterprise companies in manufacturing segment, in automotive, and in government, where they want to go deploy 5G infrastructure in their manufacturing plant or in the managing telemetry from those vehicles, or in the government environment, particularly on battleships and campus environments, or even in classified methods or ways in terms of how they want to deploy that. Now, obviously, the technology itself is the same, whether you apply it for public network or private network. But in terms of how you deploy it, how you scale it, how you manage it, there are differences in terms of how you'd operate a smaller environment versus a larger environment. And I think people really need to understand some of those challenges. And then the partnerships also are incredibly important in terms of building this type of private 5G. The one last element here is what enterprises really care about is not so much as the infrastructure, but they care about applications. They care about what applications they are running on the infrastructure, and they care about what services they're actually delivering. So you really need better integration from an infrastructure layer to the applications layer in the context of manageability and service assurance. That's really critical for the enterprise. Whereas in telco, they have tools to be able to do that. In enterprise, they want all of that integrated together. And I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges we see in enterprise private 5G.
Thanks, Azhar. And Vikram, what challenges are you seeing?
I think the key difference when you go to enterprise applications versus consumers, as was in 4G, is the importance of SLAs and enforcing critical application metrics. All the industry verticals that we talked about, they are either mission critical applications, life critical applications, or safety critical applications. All of these applications cannot even tolerate a transient defect or a minor hiccup in how the network is functioning, because if there is a minor hiccup, it could be detrimental to either a business process or to a life of an individual or to the safety on the road. So the importance of assuring critical performance metrics is paramount when you're supporting enterprise 5G. Whereas in the consumer case, it wasn't that critical. If my call dropped, I could redial, I could move to a different location if I have a poor coverage. So there was a lot of flexibility in the consumer world where if you generally had a well-operating network, you could get away with it. But the strict enforcement of things like latency, reliability, throughput, these become in significantly more important when you're serving enterprise applications.
And Vikram, I'd like to build on that last point there. You talked about SLAs, but what exactly are the customer expectations for deploying successfully enterprise 5G? What are they expecting from it?
Customers, I use a term called trusted network. So what the customers are expecting from an enterprise 5G, if they are going to put their mission critical applications on it, they want the network to be able to deliver the performance, the security that they really demand from that. Security is another important point that I didn't bring up before, but these devices are not smart enough. They're not intelligent to protect themselves. And there is a lot of vulnerabilities in terms of attacks on these devices that can turn them into botnets, in turn create more attacks on the network and bring down critical infrastructure. So I think that customer expectations are whoever is delivering the network, whether it's a managed service provider, a telco carrier, or a system integrator, is to design and build and operate this network as a completely trusted network, which can deliver on performance as well as security requirements for the network.
Now, as we said at the beginning of this program, Red Hat and NETSCOUT are collaborating in this area. Azhar, what strengths and capabilities do both companies bring to address the opportunities here?
Interesting question. Thank you, Guy. Actually, we've worked very hard with our partners to enable the infrastructure to be able to deploy it in various different footprints, particularly for enterprise 5G. But the area that Vikram just mentioned is actually incredibly important, is to provide that level of application SLA. And what we can provide from an infrastructure layer perspective is a lot of information around infrastructure metrics, infrastructure KPIs. But we also need, in addition to that, application level metrics and application level KPIs, because you need to be able to correlate them together. When you correlate them, then you can actually very easily troubleshoot where the problems were and be able to prove the SLA that you have on that given application. Because ultimately, as I said earlier, what the customer really cares about is their application. They don't care about the infrastructure. So, but they need the ability to get that delivered from the infrastructure, and they need the ability to monitor, troubleshoot, manage, and correlate that information so that they can understand what the challenges are and where the problems are so that they can address the root cause of it. So in this space, what we've been working with NETSCOUT is exactly that, which is NETSCOUT has this capability to do application level SLAs, application level KPIs, application level metrics. They can measure things like mean opinion score for voice traffic. Now from there, we have the infrastructure layer metrics from the hardware layer, from the software layer, from the OS layer, from the system layer. And we can actually then combine these two together and create a telemetry framework model that in turn allows you to build a data lake environment, do the analytics, and make it more predictive rather than just being reactive when you automate the entire process.
And Vikram, following on from what Azhar said about the partnership, how can both Red Hat and NETSCOUT bring innovation to this space to address some of these key challenges?
Yeah, great question. So I'll pick up where Azhar left off. I think if you look at the landscape today in any cloud native deployment, there is not a shortage of metrics. There are multiple sources of data that is being generated by either the infrastructure or the containers themselves, the workloads, and the application layer. The problem customers have is these are all siloed in their own environment, and to be able to correlate through automated workflows, so I can very quickly drill down into the root cause of any issues that are experiencing. That's where there is a big gap. So this is where I think NETSCOUT, the power of their platform and their platform-oriented metrics and NETSCOUT's service and application layer metrics, if we can bring them together and create a unified workflow for identifying and troubleshooting problems in a unified way, I think that will address this very important challenge for customers. They want a single pane of glass. They want to be able to look across how their applications and services are behaving, and then be able to quickly drill down and find out where the problem is. And that should not require a lot of manual piecing together of information or looking across multiple screens and swivel chairing and all that. So if we can put it all together, this is an innovation that I believe NETSCOUT and Red Hat can bring together, is to tie together all these metrics into a unified single pane of glass, so it makes it really easy for our customers to diagnose and troubleshoot problems.
Well, Vikram and Azhar, thank you both very much for telling us more about this partnership and sharing your views on enterprise 5G. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.